Welcome back, everybody. This video is a tour of Sparta. Sparta is one of my favorite tools that comes built into Kali now, and I hope to show you why. Once again, this is a default Kali build. This is actually the virtual image that I pulled straight from the site, and I've made no major modifications other than adding a user for myself and Bitcoin. Get things going. I'm going to witch Sparta, which will show us where this utility is invoked from. And it's going to be user bin Sparta. This shouldn't be anything surprising to people who are familiar with Debian, especially Kali. Most utilities are going to be running from a location similar to this. To start the program, I'm simply going to call Sparta, and what you'll notice is it will actually hijack your terminal. This is important because if there are any diagnostic things you want to look at, or if you want to see the location of where a file is saved, or any kind of under the hood type things or information you'd like to garner from it, this is a quick way to get that information. You also will notice, though, because it is using this terminal and the graphical user interface is dependent on this, if you accidentally close the terminal, it closes your Sparta instance, so make sure to save your results. So I'm going to call a new instance, and we'll be greeted with the graphical user interface for Sparta. A quick summary of what this tool actually is would be a wrapper for a lot of the tools that come baked into Kali. Getting into this field, I was definitely told not to rely on graphical user interfaces or front ends, basically anything that would keep me away from the command line. And while I agree that that's a good idea, when learning these utilities, I also think that if you're part of a team, or if you are already in the pen testing environment, or maybe you're at a capture the flag event, speed is really something that's working against you. This is a great tool, this is a great utility to basically, you have a lot of other tools at your disposal a lot quicker. So to get started, I'm going to click on your left box, click here to add host or hosts to scope, and I'm going to give it an IP address. In this environment, I have one other box in the range, and I do so happen to know the IP address beforehand. This is also an information you could use a tool such as NetDiscover, or if you're in a real-world situation, this would be information that you've probably garnered from other type of enumeration. But for lab's sake and to keep the focus on Sparta, I'm just going to input that, and you'll notice that you can give it's flexible in how it accepts IP ranges. You can give the CIDR notation, you can give a single IP address, or you can even give dashed ranges. You'll notice down here, run an nmap host discovery and run a staged nmap scan. This is, if you haven't guessed by now, nmap is absolutely one of the tools that this is a wrapper for, and I would say it's a major part of how it parses information to other tools as well. I'm going to go ahead and add this to scope, and it's going to begin our staged nmap scan. So you'll see down here, it's running nmap stage 1, the host. It'll give you the start time, and when it ends, it'll give you the end time and basic status for it. As it gets information from the remote host, you'll start to see some of these boxes begin to fill up. See, it found our host, and now it's actually dropped into stage 2, and now it's using Nikto, which is a popular web vulnerability assessment tool. It's also used screenshot to grab a screenshot on port 80, and as it continues to discover open ports, it'll begin to pass these off to tools that it believes would be able to enumerate information from these open services. And while this is churning through it, it's staged nmap scan and subsequent other tools. We're going to go over some of the other things you can do. So you have a built-in help function. That's interesting. If you want to learn how to get more into it or how to use it more efficiently, the help documentation is actually pretty nice. File. A good thing is when I'm on pen testing engagements or I'm working with teams and I want to be able to save my information, this has a built-in capability to save Sparta as a exportable document. You're also able to import in-map scans that you've done outside of Sparta, and that would be nice. Once again, first thing that comes to mind is in a collaborative environment, you can take other enumeration efforts and populate into Sparta. You also notice the Brute tab. This is actually a wrapper for the tool Hydra. If you are familiar with it, or if you're not, this might help ease the learning curve with it. It basically gives you all the options that are available in Hydra, the command line format, just in a nice GUI wrapper. So you see it's still churning through its nmap scan, and now it's doing some SMTP. This is actually one of the tools I grabbed images from. It's having a problem with the X11 screenshot tool. So let's go over some of the things we found, and it'll help explain some of these tabs as well. So as results were populated, it starts to fill in these. So you have your services tab, which show you all the open ports, protocols, the state, and then it actually guesses based on the service that it found there, and it compares that to the well-known port. And then it actually did version scanning. So this is because of the nmap scan that was conducted. You can get rough versioning. So the information tab shows you the status. Notes. This tab allows you to take basic notes, and like I mentioned earlier, you can export these and import your Sparta results as a document. This allows you to kind of share that information or anything you thought would be important. Next, we're on to one of the tools that this is a wrapper for, another awesome tool, NICTO. It's a web assessment or web vulnerability assessment tool. You'll see it was able to kind of run against its built-in plugins, and you get the open source vulnerability database, which is a proprietary format. And these are things you can research. If you haven't guessed by now what our remote host is, it's absolutely Metasploitable 2. I grabbed a fresh copy because I figured this would have a lot of open services and it would look cool to have a bunch of results. SMTP enum. If you kind of click through here, you'll see a bunch of different tools that, as it found these open services, it knew to pass them off to run these subsequent scans. You can tell what the core tools are, though. You'll see a lot of repeat offenders, so to speak. And if you also notice, too, a lot of these are the same utility, the same tool, but you'll see that a lot of these have successful attempts at guessing username and password. So this is anonymous, SMTP. No, I guess that wasn't as successful. And we can go through these. Rich content. While we have a single host, it may not be as impactful, but if you were to do a range of hosts, this host tab will populate with all of the remote devices that it found. If this isn't clear, or maybe you have a focus, say, you know what, I'm focusing on FTP or TFTP or SSH, that's going to be my next attack vector. Well, then you could also click this tab to filter your results by found services. So as I mentioned earlier, say I'm worried about FTP. This allows me to filter all the hosts by what port and protocol are found. So HTTP is going to show my web servers, IRC, my chats. There's also the Tools tab, which allows you to filter by the tools that Sparta was able to use, whether it's successful or not. Like I mentioned earlier, this is based on the services that it found in its original enumeration scan. As I mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to save as my desktop tour. And then you'll notice the file format is Sparta project file, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that extension here in a second. So pull this back up. I'm going to change directories in my desktop and do ls, and you'll see Tour of Sparta. That is your Sparta file, and then you also see Tour of Sparta tool output. So let's change directories into that. And if you guessed by the very verbose name what would be in here, you're probably correct. So you've got your FTP default, your nmap result. These are going to be your tool output. So if you want to see the screenshots that were found, well, I'm going to change the directory into screenshots folder, and you'll see the nice little images that are there. We'll go take a look at the nmap results while we're here in the neighborhood, and you'll see that it saved it as the greppable, the standard nmap, and then the XML. It does not, however, save it as the script kiddie format, I'm sad to say, but it would not be hard to change the format if you really wanted to see the uber elite speak version of these results. So, as I mentioned earlier when we witched, see user bin Sparta. Like many other things, almost everything in all honesty, in Kali Linux, the configuration and kind of the nuts and bolts behind a lot of these things, utilities, as to say, are going to be in user share. And then Sparta. And what I'm looking for is sparta.conf. This is going to be your main configuration file. And if I do a file on that, see, it's a symbolic link to etsy-sparta.conf. What this is, there's a cool functionality to Sparta. They kind of almost encouraging you to kind of mess with it or add functionality to it. Is the ability when you invoke a new instance of Sparta, it actually pulls from the etsy-sparta.conf, and if it does not find user share sparta.conf, it will generate a new version. So I'm going to do some little house cleaning on my desktop here. I'm going to keep this open a little bit. I would actually recommend you close the instance of Sparta, but since we're not going to be making any changes, just kind of popping the hood on what's going on and how it works, and I'm going to explain the staged nmap scan that it runs. It's actually nano the sparta.conf file. So this is actually all of Sparta is written in Python, and it really is straightforward if you're familiar with the programming language. If there are any changes you want to make, this would be the location to make it. You can see general settings, brute settings, stage and map settings. So when we started it, you saw that it started on stage 1. Actually, let me pull up the scanner here. stage 1, stage 2, eventually stage 3. And this is what it was doing. So stage 1, it actually breaks out the ports into what the developers felt were the most popular, and then by the time you get to stage 5, you're scanning those high ephemeral ports that probably not too many services are going to be open on. A lot of your core network utilities are going to be on these lower ports, especially around 1024 and lower. That's typically where you're going to find your open service ports if your remote host is in fact, utilizing that service. So we see 80.443, those are our web. Stage 2 is going to be our mail. I'm not going to break these out for you guys, but you will also see that it specifies some UDP, and then you get into port ranges, and these are hyphenated. So you see kind of, instead of actually listing these out, it just goes, yeah, this block, this is not as popular. And then you get to the 30,000 to 65,535. Keep scrolling down, you'll see your tools. There are a lot more tools than this. What this does is it correlates to, if I were to host and I right click, gives me the option of port scan, mark as checked. This mark as checked does literally what it sounds like. It marks it as checked. If you wanted to either keep tabs on it or run a new scan against a range, it will not run against that checked host. Port scan, you either run unicorn scan, run nmap, the top 1000 is going to be your fast UDP scan, full UDP, full TCP, and then you can run another staged down here at the bottom. And as I toggle back to the Sparta.conf, some of these will make a lot more sense. If you wanted to edit these, like I mentioned earlier, this is absolutely the place that you would make that change. Just keep the variables that it's using here. Make sure that you don't forget to include those if you delete them. Otherwise, your performance is going to suffer. Here's the port actions. These are the tool. Once it finds an open port, this is what it passes it on to. And that's that. I would really like to keep, I'm actually going to end it here. I want to keep this really brief just to, if anything, inspire you to use this tool. By no means, don't use this as an opportunity to gloss over the tools that are lying underneath. I would really recommend learning those as their own individual selves, because most of the functionality in those tools that this is a wrapper for, it's kind of lost. Most of the tools here, you can do more than just what's done here, but if you, like I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, if you're in a capture the flag situation, this tool is great for quick enumeration. So I hope this inspired you. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you disliked it, feel free to dislike it. If you have anything more about the tool that you'd like to mention, put those down in the comments. And if you want to be kept in the loop, hit the subscribe button, and I'd love to see you back with the next video. Have a nice day.